All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach J.K. McLeod, and we are kicking off episode number 280 of Help Me Understand. Before getting into today's fitness-focused episode, which is what we do here on Tuesdays, I, as always, want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I truly, truly appreciate it, and thank you for being here. All right, let's get into today's fitness-focused episode. I'm going to share a bit more context on answers that I gave to a couple of questions on Threads. One of the questions was, how did you transition to being a morning workout person? Another question was getting back into the gym after a 2-year hiatus. Do you have any tips? And then I am going to share with you some thoughts that I've got on something that I jotted down as a reminder to myself based on conversations that I've had with some other folks. And then actually there was a kind of we'll call it a weird parallel with observing some college basketball this past weekend. And what I wrote down is you're going to have multiple attempts before you get it right. So you can't expect that your first iteration of a plan is actually going to be the thing that gets you the result that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and we're going to back it up just a little bit. And first we'll start with a couple of questions / posts that I commented on Threads and want to give a bit more perspective, a bit more of context to how I responded to those particular posts. So if you have tuned into the Help Me Understand podcast on Tuesdays over the last, let's say, month-ish or so, then a pretty common theme has been I've done a Q&A format where some of the questions have been ones that have come directly to me, and then many of them have been ones based on things that I've responded to on Threads. And then here on the podcast, I have an opportunity to go a bit more in depth and cover a few different angles. So we're going to continue with that theme for the foreseeable future here. Okay, so one of the questions was asking just anybody who is reading the post, excuse me, how did you transition to being a morning workout person? And so for me, when I first started working out, let me rewind. When I first started working out consistently, and the way that I frame it was when I first consistently went into a gym on purpose and not under any sort of duress, which was basically referring to back in the day when I was trying to make like my second or third failed attempt at community college. One of the classes that I signed up for, I can't remember what the name of the class was. However, I just remember, excuse me, that based on the name of the class, I didn't know that it was going to meet inside of the weight room at the community college. It was in St. Louis. So at St. Louis Community College at Forest Park. So shout out anybody who knows where that is. And I remember that when I went to that class and then it met inside of the weight room, and I was like, okay, well, maybe this is something where we're just meeting. It might have been some sort of a health class or something along those lines. And I'm thinking that it's just going to be dealing with just general health stuff. However, it became very apparent within the first few minutes as the professor came in and started talking that we were going to be working out in the class. That was an immediate no for me at that time, which is really wild to think that where I am now, and think back to at that time, I remember being so frustrated and so disgusted by it that I even called my dad at the time. And for reference here, I was definitely in my 20s. Yeah, because I moved to St. Louis in 2001, I want to say, somewhere around there. So I was definitely in my 20s at that point and had the audacity after dropping out of a 4-year college and making an attempt to go to a community college, I had the audacity to call my dad and complain about the requirement to take a gym class. Those are wild times, folks. So anyways, I actually dropped that class and also didn't finish that. So here I am now. But anyways, fast forward from that experience and the first time that I truly, like on purpose, decided to go to the gym consistently was after losing my full-time job. And what I did while I was searching for a new full-time job is I created a routine where I would drop our daughter off at daycare at that time. Yeah, she would have still been like daycare or kindergarten, somewhere around that range, like very young. And so I'd drop her off and then I would go to the gym. So I would go to the gym, let's say it was around 8 o'clock in the morning. So when I first started training, I started around 8 a.m. And to me, that wasn't super duper early at all. So 8 a.m. is where I started. Then, as I secured a new full-time position, that position required me typically to work somewhere between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. for the most part. So still going to the gym around 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. That was my routine for a couple of years at this point. So stayed pretty consistent with that. I occasionally would go to this noon spin class that I really, really dug because the teacher was really, really energetic and cool. So I would go to like this noon spin class once a week, but primarily I would go to the gym 7:30, 8-ish in the morning for the most part. Then after that, I transitioned into a job that would require me for 2 to 3 times out of the week, I would be commuting to that job. And that job was about a 2-hour drive away from my house. So I would actually be there for a couple of days and then come back home, and a lot of back and forth. And so with adjusting to that being my primary schedule, where I had to adapt. Basically, my work shifts could start as early as 5 o'clock in the morning and could start as late as 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But the kicker is that those shifts were being completed, 2 hours away from my house. So there was travel time if I needed to do that. So I was working out anywhere from I could do a workout as early as 5 o'clock in the morning, or I could start a workout as late as midnight. I was working in Chicago at the time, and 24-hour gyms, I think it was called Export. Yeah, Export Fitness. For anybody who's familiar in maybe the Midwest or Chicago areas, Export, and then I think Charter was the other one. And they were 24-hour gyms. So I joined those so that I could work out anytime that I wanted. And they also had one location that was here in the city that we lived in. So I figured, hey, I can just work out anytime. So that's really when I first made my foray into working out super early in the morning, because that's just when I could fit it in. There would be times where I'd train at 3 or 4 a.m., sometimes 5 a.m., usually around 4 or 5 a.m., train in the morning, and then hop on like a train or hop in the car to get to work. Then I'd be gone for a couple of days and then come back. So there was a lot of back and forth. So I say all that just to say that when I'm talking to folks about the importance of understanding that, first you got to figure out what is your schedule, what is required of you outside of your training. So when you're looking at a training program or a training plan, the first step in deciding what the right program is going to be isn't based on the program itself. It's actually, in my opinion, heavily, heavily based and needs to be rooted in what are your requirements outside of the gym that you will need to navigate so that you can then select the right plan. It's not, okay, I'm going to select the plan and then let me figure out how I'm going to formulate my life around this. And so that's a good portion of where my bias comes from, because if I had specifically said, okay, I'm going to eat this way, I'm going to sleep this way, and I'm going to work out this way with no regard to my work schedule at all, like that just would not have been feasible in any way, shape, or form as somebody who was commuting quite a bit and also had other responsibilities to take care of here at home. So when back to the initial question, like how did you transition to being a morning workout person? That's just really, from what I saw, that was really the only choice that I had. So I was either like, I was going to choose to either work out or not work out, and not working out wasn't a choice that I gave myself. So I made that decision. And then I have options as far as the types of workouts that I want to do. But when it came down to it, it was like, hey, here's your window to be able to work out. If it's at 4 a.m., then cool. It's at 4 a.m. That's the time you're going to be able to get it done. Now, I did that for a couple of years and then got a new position closer to home or at home, basically, or not at home, but in my home city. And at that point, then it just became easier to go ahead and get up and go work out at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning because it was the best possible option to be able to get a focused training session in prior to anyone, for the most part, whether it be in my home or at work, prior to just about anyone needing me to respond to anything or having an expectation that I would be available to respond to anything. And I am positive for sure that there are many folks out there who can absolutely relate to that being one of the main catalysts for them training early-ish in the morning, and early can be relative. However, I think that there's plenty of folks who can relate to, hey, when it came down to it, it's not necessarily that working out in early in the morning started off with I am super pumped to get up at 4:45 a.m. to go get a workout in. It likely was, man, that's like my kids are actually still asleep. There's not 13 emails that I need to answer right away. There's not a meeting, like that sort of a thing. And I have a chance to really focus and get this done. Maybe there's some folks who also they feel like after work is a better time for them. But then they realized after trying that a few times that there's too many things that can potentially come up. I was going to say potentially go wrong. I'll say there's too many unexpected things that potentially can come up with counting on being able to get your workout in at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. if you happen to be like a 9 to 5 or like 8 to 4, like that sort of a thing. I've just found, and the folks that I typically come into contact with have found that the more responsibilities that you have for both yourself and others, then your chance of being able to get a focused, somewhat energetic and intentional training session in tends to be better in the morning than it is in the evening. So that's just what I've tended to find. Now I will add one other thing before moving to this other question that I responded to. Recently, what I've done is periodically, I'd say like once to twice a week, I'll go to our commercial gym, so Planet Fitness here, and primarily do like cardio or just walk on the treadmill while my son is at one of his practices, or there's an evening commitment of some sort we've got to get him to. And I'll go there. And I've done this for a couple of reasons. One, if it's a day where I haven't been at my retail position, so I haven't been moving around a ton, just based on the nature of that particular job. So I've spent most of my time seated here, either working on coaching stuff, writing programs, making content, that sort of a thing. Then it's an opportunity, by going to the gym later on, it's an opportunity for me to just hop on the treadmill, get some steps in, potentially some cardio, stuff like that. That's reason one, just it's helpful. And reason number two, I I write training programs for everyday people. So everyday people don't all work out at 5 o'clock in the morning. Many of them, and even many of my one-on-one clients who train in gyms will train at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., somewhere around there. So I'm very much like, if you know, like method actors, the people who, if they're going to take on a particular role, then they immerse themselves in that particular role. So let's say that somebody is going to play the role of like a truck driver, then they might even go try and get certified as a long haul truck driver and go drive a truck, or they'll go in ride alongs with truck drivers for like months on end to get a feel for it. I am very much that same way when it comes to trying to get myself in a similar type of environment that what my clients may be inside of the gym. That's something that, now as I'm kind of speaking it out, may not be the norm for many folks, especially if they're talking about like writing a group training program versus a one-on-one program. As far as back as I can remember, though, I've always been like that. Like I've always been curious about putting myself in as close to the same scenario as my client may be. So one of the things that I have taken on is going to the gym sometimes at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or even 7 p.m. and just walking on the treadmill and just kind of observing um, how, like, what is the environment like? How long are people waiting to get to machines? Because those are the things that can make it really, really frustrating to execute a training program for both my clients and people that are doing like the group training programs that I have. So being able to get an understanding of those things, I believe, is an advantage that I have. And it is really interesting too. I do a lot of observation being different than judging. So I do a lot of observation of just kind of looking around and seeing like, oh yeah, I could totally see how, you got one person that's kind of got their stuff on one machine while they're bouncing it back and forth to another machine. And the coach and the programmer in me is going, why, man, I want to make sure that if I write a training program, I'm not writing a training program that that the person is not aware that they don't have to superset the leg extension and the hamstring curl. Like, they don't need to take up two machines. They can do them separately. They also could have a substitute if the machine's not available. So these are the things that I'm like constantly thinking. So I realized that took a bit of a turn from the initial question of transitioning into being a morning workout person. And also, welcome to my brain when it comes to just constantly thinking of different ways to make programs better and things like that. So the initial question transitioned into being a morning workout person because that to me was the best time to be able to get it in. And I would say the same thing to you all. What is the best time for you to be able to get it in? All right. The second question was, I'm getting back into the gym after a 2-year hiatus. Do you have any tips? And my response to the person was very simply, have a plan before you walk in. And I scrolled to look at some of the other answers that the person was given. And there were some really, really good opinions and advice that were given. And this was a previous episode that I did, I think last year, about the difference between advice, opinion, and counsel. So in the comments on social media, what you typically will see is mostly opinion from folks. You'll mostly see opinions, which an opinion is just, here's what I think. Advice is going to be well-meaning, typically, may or may not come with a certain level of external knowledge or educational knowledge. It'll be a mix of that person's experience. So if I'm offering you advice, I would be doing it based on my opinion mixed with also my own experience that I personally have had. So well-meaning, however, it still doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the best answer for you. And then counsel would be what I try to do and what many of my colleagues, not try to do, what I do and what many of my colleagues do and what we hold ourselves responsible for, which is a mixture of listening to what you're asking, then getting some more context and some more understanding. Then I take my knowledge, my educational knowledge, I take practical experience where we've applied that knowledge to other people who maybe have had similar situations, and then also my own experience with things that I've done myself, put all that together, and that's where you then get counsel. So opinion, advice, and counsel. Those are just how I try to kind of separate those things out. So again, many of the comments were a lot of advice or opinions and advice where it was like, hey, take your time, take it slow. I remember when I rushed it back and I just did too much, some people were dropping like, yeah, just stick to your compound lifts. So all very, very helpful things, very kind things, which is awesome. Again, I've mentioned this before and I'll keep saying it. The vibe on Threads, like my Threads vibe is fantastic. Like my algorithm is fantastic. My advice, or actually my counsel, just so I can use the terms in the same vibe here. My counsel would be ensure that you have some sort of a plan before you walk in if it's been 2 years since you've been inside the gym. So whether that means that my plan is to walk on the treadmill for about 10 minutes, then I'm going to spend about 5 minutes doing some mobility things and just getting a lay of the land because I haven't been here in quite some time. And then I have a specific, let's say, full body workout program that I'm going to follow. So walk in with a plan. And that's my advice, and my counsel here is based on primarily seeing it done differently than that, where folks will walk in and really just kind of not necessarily jump right back in. What they'll do is they'll walk in, probably go on the elliptical for a few minutes or the treadmill for a few minutes, and then just kind of wander around the floor and see what machines are open. And I'll do kind of like a little bit of this and I'll do a little bit of that. And it's kind of like dabbling in a few different things. Like I'll do some sets of bicep curls, and that machine looks cool. Haven't messed around with that in a while. So I'll try that. And I remember I used to like leg extensions. So I'll try those. And then, you know, I now just feel like I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to get back on the treadmill and I'll just run for a while. And while that can be okay, you likely are getting back into the gym because you have some sort of a specific goal, whether it is based on you're working on improving something specifically from a medical health standpoint, whether you are specifically like, hey, I want to gain strength, whether you specifically have some sort of a aesthetic goal. Let's keep it 100. Like maybe you are getting ready to go on a cruise in about 3 months. And so you're like, yeah, I gotta tighten things up, as the folks say. So, okay, that's what you're doing. Regardless of that, having a plan, some sort of a plan before you walk in, it would be my best counsel for you. So if you're getting back into the gym after any sort of time off, a hiatus, this person was 2 years, regardless, always walk in with some sort of a plan. And whether it's something that's super duper like detailed, or if it's a general, you're going to, how I described, you're going to do 10 minutes of this, 5 minutes of this, and then you're going to run yourself through three times through a full body circuit. And then you're going to walk for a few minutes and then you're going to call it a day. Have a plan before you walk in. All right. And then that gets us into this last part. And this one, this is really like a riff. This could definitely be considered just a quick little rant here. So what I jotted down is this reminder that you're going to have multiple attempts before you get it right. And some context on where this is coming from is just having interactions with folks where I'm not going to say that they're ready to quit and throw in the towel. It's more there's this sense of frustration because their plan isn't working. And when I say their plan isn't working, they just don't feel like it's going the way that they thought it was going to go. And many times this is after maybe 2 weeks, I would say. So the whole like the first day things didn't go right and so you quit, a lot of that doesn't necessarily come my way. And I'm not surprised that stuff doesn't come my way, because I don't think that I necessarily give off a like I'm the person that you want to come to after you've quit after one day. Like that's just definitely not like my thing. An analogy or a parallel maybe that I'll give is, when you've got mom and dad, or you've got aunt and uncle, or you have mom and grandma, or grandpa and grandma. You've got two different folks in a household. And sometimes you go to one when you want a certain level of response and a certain type of nurturing, and you go to a different one if you want the other type of response and the other type of nurturing. And I don't think, based on the feedback that I've been given, I don't tend to be the person that folks come to when they're like, yeah, I tried this once and I quit. Typically people will come to me when they're like, I've been at this for a while and the plan is just not working at all. So that's where some of this is coming from. So let me share with you real quick what I jotted down. I'll try and bring it all together. So even when you have accurately identified the problem that you are trying to solve, it still is going to take multiple iterations of your initial plan to find the answer. So when I jotted this down, what I was thinking is that in the coaching world, we talk about the difference between trying to solve a problem and addressing symptoms. So an example would be like if you go to the doctor and you have a cut, or maybe you don't even go to the doctor, but let's say you have a cut, then you get a Band-Aid and you put a Band-Aid on that particular cut. That takes care of a symptom. The problem, though, is that you keep getting cut because you're not careful about how you use a particular tool, or you ran over a pothole and so it busted your tire, and so you got the tire fixed. That was a solution to the symptom. So the symptom is that your tire got busted. The problem is that that pothole, you keep running over the same pothole that's there. Like that pothole is your problem. So the difference between the problem and the solution. So when I say that, even though you've correctly identified the problem, you have identified like what the source of the issue is. So you've addressed like there's a pothole. Like that's the problem, is we need to fix these potholes. It still will take multiple iterations of your initial plan to find the answer. So you may have decided, and accurately decided, like, hey, my problem is that I need to be more consistent with my training and I don't have a solid training plan to follow. Well, let's say that you build a training plan, you sign up for one of my training plans, whatever it may be, and then you get to the gym and it took you 90 minutes to do the workout, and you have 1 hour to do the workout itself. So then you're like, well, I've been doing that for about 3 weeks and these workouts are just taking way too long. So this is definitely not going to work. Instead of doing that, and this was actually a very real situation that one of my clients had, where they were like, yeah, I just don't know what it is. Like, this plan is not working for me at all. We need to do something completely different. And what we were able to do was sit down and actually get an understanding of what was happening. And what was happening, kind of related to what I was talking about before with observations, they had switched the time that they were going to the gym. So what was happening is that whereas previously the time that they went to the gym was super dead, so they literally had the run of the entire place to themselves. Like there was hardly anybody there. They had shifts in their work responsibilities and also their responsibilities at home, so it required them then to get their workout in going at a different time of the day. That hadn't been communicated, so when they were going at the different time of the day, it was taking them longer and longer to get the equipment that they wanted, to get the machines that they wanted, all that stuff. So it's not that we needed to completely throw out the plan. What it was is that particular iteration of the plan needed to be adjusted so that we could actually make it work. So had we just decided like, well, that plan totally sucks, let's come up with a completely new one, then we wouldn't have given credit to the fact that just because you come up with a plan, your first version that you actually go out and execute may not, and often many times won't be like your actual final version. I think about it similar to when companies have a product. So one of the things that companies will do is they'll create what's called an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. So it's basically, the way I would describe it is, when you want to put a product out on the market, you come up with the most basic version that is good enough to just get out there so that people will start using the product, and then you can get an understanding of what's working, what's not working, and then you will make revisions to that particular product until you eventually get it right. What happens many times, though, is that the consumer doesn't know that the product that they're working with is the MVP. It's the minimum viable product. Now, investors know that, and the creators know that, and the company knows that, but they don't tell the consumer that, because they want real feedback. Like, assume that this is the real product itself. So what's your feedback? So I thought about this too with Aura Ring. If you guys go back and look at the very first version of the Aura Ring that was available on Kickstarter, it will blow your mind, because the thing is ugly as all get out. And yeah, so now, after they've gotten multiple years, because it's been out for quite a while, but really took off over the past, I'd say 2-ish years. Now it's one of the hottest things out there on the wearables market. So just think about understanding that you build the plan based on what you think that your challenges are going to be, and also what your strengths are. Something that I just want to encourage you to remember, and I'll be wrapping up here shortly, is that when you have created that plan based on what you think the challenges are going to be and what strengths and resources you have, keep in mind that also assumes that the environment that's around you is going to basically allow you to execute your plan. So the conditions in which you made the plan, keep in mind those conditions may also change. Very similar again to my client who initially, when we made the plan, they had a gym that was barely being used at the times that they were there, so they had their access to whatever that they wanted. The conditions changed though. Their job changed. Their role changed, their responsibilities at home changed, pickup schedules and game schedules changed. So when they went to go try and execute that same plan, conditions were like, nah, we're not doing that. And so we had to make those adjustments. So instead of just throwing everything out and getting frustrated, when your initial plan doesn't work, I want you to think about it like it's your MVP, your minimum viable product. Think about it like it's your first couple of weeks, you're putting it out on the market and you're getting feedback on what works and what doesn't. And then you make your tweaks and adjustments from there. You don't just throw it out. So that's what I'm going to leave you with is as you are going out there to execute your plan, whether it be your nutrition, whether it be adjusting to a different sleep routine, whether it be your training, because I love executing a training program, whatever it might be, release the pressure that the first version of it has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, then that means it's not going to work. Think of it as your MVP, your minimum viable product. First, you're getting it out there so that you can road test it for a couple of weeks at least. I typically like 3 weeks to really work through things. And that typically gives you like enough real life experience to get an idea of, okay, what works, what doesn't, what feels good, what doesn't, and then making your tweaks from there. All right. We're going to go ahead and land this plane and call this an episode. So thank you. If you have listened this long, thank you again for tuning into another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I truly, truly appreciate it. Got comments, questions that you'd like me to answer on a future podcast episode, fitness related or otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. You can DM me on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. That's MCLEOD. Or you can always email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. Again, McLeod is spelled MCLEOD, and all that info is in the show notes. All right. Thanks again for hanging out. I truly appreciate it. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.